Number two, all of the bills after this first one went into effect on August 6th, on Saturday. So that first one won't go into effect until January 1st, 2017. But every bill that I'm going to talk about now for the rest of my presentation, all of those bills went into effect on Saturday, so these are now the law as of right now. Okay, the next bill is Senate Bill 1449. This deals with drones. Basically, the fancy name is Prohibited Operations of an Unmanned Aircraft. Why did I select this bill to be in our summary this year? Because a trend that we're seeing in associations is questions and problems created by drone usage of others within the association, maybe residents, maybe people from outside of your association. It's becoming a very hot topic. And for anybody that's following national news pertaining to associations, everybody's talking about this. If you Google drones and HOAs right now, you're gonna come up with a ton of hits. There's all kinds of cases, all kinds of stories all around the country talking about this. So let's talk a little bit about what Arizona did. This bill makes it unlawful for a person to operate a model aircraft or a civil unmanned aircraft, which is considered a drone, if the operation is prohibited by federal law or regulation that governs aeronautics, including FAA regulations, or if it interferes with law enforcement, firefighter, or emergency services operations. And then violations of these two sections are going to be a Class 1 misdemeanor. And so basically, if anyone's using a model aircraft or a drone, and they're doing it in such a way that it's violating federal law, FAA regulations, interfering with the police and fire doing their jobs, they're going to get Class 1 misdemeanor. They're going to be prosecuted for that, no question in my mind. This bill also makes it unlawful for a person to operate or use an unmanned aircraft or unmanned aircraft system to intentionally photograph or loiter over or near a critical facility in the furtherance of any criminal offense. And this violation is going to be a Class 6 felony. And so this is going to be like a surveillance type thing, maybe going over like Luke Air Force Base would be a critical facility. There's a number of different, reserve areas for our armed forces. So if we have somebody that's doing surveillance, obviously it's going to be a felony. Now, how do we know they're taping? That's a big question, right? I have a 9-year-old son, and he does have a drone, and I bought it for investigative purposes for this, for not just for this, but just I wanted to better understand how drones work and how you can videotape, etc. Typically, you know that somebody is videotaping on the drone. So if you're seeing a drone flying by you, and I'm getting questions on this a lot from board members, if you're seeing it flying by you and it has a red light that's either at a standstill or it's flashing, it likely means that it's videotaping. And if you haven't given them the authority to do that, that's problematic for them. Now, you're not a critical facility, but there's going to be a portion a little bit further down in this bill where they shouldn't be doing that. And I have a recent situation where, before this law was proposed this year, where everybody's waiting for the feds to come up with the drone rules, right? They were supposed to put them out last October. There have been some, minor things that they've put out, clarifications, but really they're not telling us much. It's almost like they're not quite sure what to do with drones. They're not quite sure how high they can be considered flying in someone else's airspace, how low they can go. If anybody here watches the show, The Good Wife, the television show, they had a special just on this exact subject where somebody was flying drones over a doctor's home. And the doctor was claiming that there had been an invasion of privacy because all of his patients, were being potentially videotaped. So these are all hot topics. So another portion of this law is that a city, town, or county may not enact or adopt any ordinance or rule that relates to the ownership or operation of an unmanned aircraft or unmanned aircraft system. Any ordinance or rule that violates this is considered void. Why do we get that? There's always a story on these bills. So the town of Paradise Valley, about a year and a half ago, they were very seriously considering an ordinance on drones. They had an unfortunate situation where there had been a killing and a murder in an association in Paradise Valley many years ago. And as the person that committed the murder served his time, but he came back after he'd been released from prison, and he brought a drone back to the home where the murder occurred, and it was flying and videotaping above the home. And of course, the owner of the home didn't know the purpose that he was there, but and this is all written up in the paper if you read it, it's a good juicy story. And so anyways, they called the police and said, hey, this person shouldn't be here. And they've got this drone flying over our property. Well, once the police arrested him, his record came up right away, and red flags were going everywhere because he came back to the same home. Now, it was a new owner, but the whole situation was just odd, to say the least. So Paradise Valley was being very reactive, and they decided that they were going to be considering an ordinance to prohibit drone usage. And I know that people in the state of Arizona were going crazy, like how can a city, town, or municipality try to pass a law that's, potentially going to be contrary to the feds who really have jurisdiction over the airspace. Ultimately, the town of PV did back down and did not pass anything, but that's why this line is in here. They're saying, hey, you can't do this. If you're a city, town, or municipality, you can't pass any sort of an ordinance, or it would be considered void if it violates this particular rule. This bill does not apply to a person authorized by the FAA to use or operate an unmanned aircraft system if that person complies with that authorization. It does not prohibit a city, town, or county from adopting ordinances or rules on the operation of a public unmanned aircraft that is owned by the city, town, or county. So if they own it, we can pass rules to protect it. It does not prohibit a city, town, or county from enacting or adopting ordinances or rules that regulate the takeoff or landing of a model aircraft in a park or preservation owned by the city, town, or county if there are other parks available for model aircraft operations. So the legislature didn't want to tick off all of the model aircraft people that like to go to the park on the weekends, so they put that little exception in there for them. It also does not apply to the operation of unmanned aircraft by a first responder while acting in a first responder's official capacity. If you're seeing any of the police chases now, you'll notice that the drones are typically ahead of any police chase, especially in really large cities, so there's a protection there. Civil unmanned aircraft means an unmanned aircraft or unmanned aircraft system that's operated by a person for any purpose other than strictly for hobby or recreational purposes, including commercial purposes, or in the furtherance of or incidental to any business or media, service, or agency. And so this is kind of important, a civil unmanned aircraft, so this is going to be for something that's hobby, right? And so if you're going to be using it for commercial purposes under the federal laws, you do have to have a license and have your drone registered with the federal government. An unmanned aircraft means an aircraft, including an aircraft commonly known as a drone, that is operated without the possibility of direct human intervention from within or on the aircraft. So I have a number of associations that have come to me already, even before this bill passed, and said we need to do something about the drones. We have an out-of-control resident who goes out into the common areas and is flying drones around all day. And the noise is driving people crazy. The neighbors want to know what he's so interested in my backyard. Some people feel that they're stalking. We had one case where there was an older gentleman who was bringing the drone over to watch some teenage kids at the pool. Just some creepy stuff, and really we couldn't do much because you call the police and there's no ordinance, right? What can they say? Maybe they can say it's a nuisance. But they don't have a lot of teeth to prosecute somebody prior to this law going into effect. So some associations have been really proactive and have adopted drone rules where they specify when drones can be used, where they can be used. If you're going to use them, you have to notify the association what for, what's your purpose. They request that realtors, if they're going to be using them for a commercial purpose, that they notify us in advance, and they give us a copy of any tape, excuse me, that they may take, excuse me, of a home, you know, for real estate purposes. We had a case within the past year where the other side used drone footage to try to improve their case, basically, in front of an administrative law judge. It kind of backfired because Paige and I have to face my two lawyers here, but we used it against them in the case because it was really beneficial to us. And so once they gave us a copy, we realized, hey, we can use this against them. So just drones are a hot topic. We're going to see more. Stay tuned. Watch our Facebook page. Watch our website. Watch for seminars coming up, because the federal government is going to have further clarification as to how low these drones can fly before they're actually in the airspace of an individual's home.